What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back into Win or Lose Chiefs News. I am your host. My name is Alex Liu, and this is my channel. Please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, comment, and share. This started off as a blog on WordPress, and I'll leave the link to that down below in the description. And then I started podcasting once a week last year on my main channel, Alu2 Productions, and now I have my own separate sub-channel just for Win or Lose Chiefs News, where I talk Chiefs news and updates, and during the season, previewing games and doing game recaps. But after the 2025 season ended, I took kind of a hiatus. I didn't even really watch much of the playoffs, hardly at all. Kind of slipped into some football depression, if you will, a little bit. Last season was pretty miserable, so didn't want anything to do with just thinking about football. The Chiefs kind of needed a couple-month break. As diehard fans know, the new league year is upon us, so I thought I would put out a blog post, which I did yesterday, for the first time since January, when the Chiefs lost to the Raiders in the final regular season game. So I wanted to kind of catch up since the Super Bowl and free agency and kind of recap a lot of things that have been going on. Also talk about a lot of the recent developments over the last couple months in regards to Arrowhead Stadium and the move to Kansas for a new stadium in 2031, pending a lot of, legal tax implications. So I wanted to talk about a few things today just regarding the offseason, free agency, and then as we look ahead to the draft next month in April. So let's get right into it. I want to first start off with Arrowhead Stadium. So it was announced, I think a couple months ago, that we are leaving Arrowhead. So we basically have 5 seasons left at Arrowhead Stadium, which has been the home for the Chiefs since 1972. I think at first I was not really looking forward to that. I was pretty sad to kind of hear the news that officially, the decision was made to move away from Arrowhead Stadium. But I think it's just an end of an era for both Arrowhead and Kauffman. So I'm actually kind of excited about it. The more I thought through things, I just kind of thought, it's an end to an era really for both stadiums. The Royals are predicted to probably move toward a more downtown location for a stadium. But for the Chiefs, I think it just makes, I think it's for Chiefs fans, I think it makes me at least appreciate Arrowhead and all of the memories even more. I think I have a little bit more optimism about the future despite the changes. The team identity and the fans' identity with Kansas City and the broader area, whether it's the Kansas or Missouri side of the border, I don't think that takes away from anything other than where, the team plays physically. But the home is still Kansas City, and they're still the Chiefs. Personally, it's actually pretty exciting that for the next 5 years, my family and I will get to be a part of this countdown, so to speak, of we have 5 seasons left to enjoy games at Arrowhead and try to go to at least one home game per season for the next 5 years until the move. My family and I, we are actually moving to Kansas City. I currently live in Maryland, so we're going to head to Kansas City in August. We found a place out there about 30 minutes outside the city. So we will be in KC in the area and looking to go to at least a game this year and at least one game over the next 5 years, and hopefully even maybe see some concerts during the spring, summer, and fall at Arrowhead before they eventually tear it down prior to the 2031 season. We're going to try to go see the Chiefs play the Chargers at Arrowhead this coming season. TBD, depending on when the schedule comes out and when that game will be. That is going to be my goal, especially with a lot of the excitement from free agency for what we're hoping for in what hopes to be a much better season in 2026 for the Chiefs. More to come regarding Arrowhead and new stadium. There's been a lot said about whether it's going to be a domed stadium potentially. I'm hoping that means maybe a retractable roof. Above all else, what's most important is that hopefully with the new stadium, we still have that same loud crowd noise and the tailgating culture. I think those are the two biggest things that I hope kind of retain from what we know as Arrowhead today. All right, so moving on to the team itself, Travis Kelce is obviously coming back for his 14th season with the Chiefs. Like most Chiefs fans, I think we're all happy that he's coming back. It would have sucked to say goodbye to Travis Kelce after the way things ended last season. What I will say is, as much as I love Travis Kelce, I do want to see him really embody more of that veteran presence and role on the offense, I think more now than ever before. So I think that means he needs to take his blocking game to a whole nother level, especially because of the changes that we made at running back, which I'll get to here in a little bit. I think the offense is going to change significantly just because Eric Bieniemy is coming back, which I will also touch on here in a moment. It doesn't mean that we're going to see Travis Kelce outside of, a play here and there. We're never going to see the same vintage Kelce in his prime from the last several years. He's going to make his plays here and there. He's going to score touchdowns here and there, but we can't expect the same amount of production. So I just want him to really be that veteran leader that, he can be a safety blanket for Mahomes at times, but he can't be the only guy that Mahomes looks to in a time of dire need if no one else is open and the play comes crashing down. Those other guys are going to have to get open for Mahomes, and it can't just fall on Kelce to be that safety valve. This is me just kind of being critical, but might be unpopular opinion amongst Chiefs fans, but I've just noticed that last year in particular, but really I would say the last few years, there have definitely been some pretty bad plays at times that Kelce has made in really critical situations. Last year against Houston and Philly, not the reason that we lost those games, but Travis had drops that were tipped up in the air and they were intercepted, and those plays happened in very, very critical times during those games. I would rather see less is more out of Trav. Still a great player, great guy, and he's forever always going to be a Chiefs and NFL Hall of Famer and legend, but I think this needs to be a year where Travis Kelce doesn't take a back seat, but just kind of know your role, know your responsibility. Travis Kelce does not need to be the one on this offense trying to play hero. We don't really need that. I think just get what you can out of Travis Kelce. Rashee Rice, Worthy, Tyquan Thornton, those guys are going to have to step up. We're hopefully going to have a much better running game. So hopefully the pressure is off of both Mahomes and Kelce, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And speaking of Patrick Mahomes, we've all been kind of monitoring the rehab for him, his timeline for return, sounding like he is actually ahead of his rehab and recovery schedule. He is very much targeting aggressively a week 1 return. And I think that's just in part Mahomes' competitive nature, but I said this on some of my last podcast episodes last season to end the year, that as much as I am hopeful that Mahomes comes back for week 1, because a lot of the talk has been about how he might be ready to come back at the beginning of the season, at least being on the field, mobility-wise, he is more than likely not going to be and feel quite like himself in terms of being mobile until closer to the start of 2027. So you're looking at the end of the regular season. We're going to talk about this, but that's why the running game this year more than ever is going to be imperative. I also thought it was very interesting, and I think most Chiefs fans were shocked. I don't think anyone saw this coming. So the Chiefs brought in Jake Haener like a couple months ago, or a month ago, I think. And, that I think that was very much presumed to be maybe compete for a QB2 role, probably more practice squad. Obviously, Chris Oladokun is just most likely forever going to be a practice squad guy with the Chiefs as long as he's with us. Scout team kind of a guy. Seeing Gardner Minshew get let go and sign elsewhere, knowing that he's really not a starter material in the league. The Chiefs trading their 2027 6th round pick, so we're not giving up really hardly anything at all, for Justin Fields. And we also are only paying, I think, $3 million of his salary for this season. I think the Jets are eating $7 million of that, of his $10 million owed for this year. I think that's actually a very interesting move. I will be the first to admit that for the first few years that Justin Fields has been in the league, I'm not going to lie, I made fun of him quite a bit just because coming out of Ohio State, there was a lot of hype around him, and I really wasn't surprised at all that he was kind of a flop, kind of a bust in the NFL. Then again, to be fair, Justin Fields also was not in the best of setups early on in his career so far. Bears, Jets, I think it was with the Steelers for a year. To his credit, Justin Fields is a mobile guy. And I think even with Mahomes back and relatively healthy, maybe not 100% yet to start the year, Justin Fields, I think, can be a dual threat, Taysom Hill kind of a guy for us that hopefully Andy Reid finds ways to use him more than just QB2. And I think to speak to that, we've seen something like that before when Andy Reid got Michael Vick, albeit much later on in his career. Michael Vick was nowhere near the same kind of guy, and especially coming back from, time in prison, not being, fully healthy and in football shape yet. But I think Justin Fields adds someone that I'm hoping can be that 3rd down, 4th and short like inches, a yard to gain. Put him in there for the QB sneak. No more of this direct snap to Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, or putting Noah Gray in as the tight end sneak guy. Just go with Justin Fields. And also, I think Justin Fields, this might be the point in his career where he needs to kind of convert and transition into QB as the priority, but also a receiver or even a wildcat, multi-purpose gadget utility kind of a weapon. So those are just kind of my thoughts on that. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's thought about that with Justin Fields and just his versatility and athleticism, but I'm hoping that Justin Fields maybe can provide a little bit more value to us other than just backup quarterback for the Chiefs. Okay, let's quickly go through some coaching changes because this is, old news at this point, but obviously, like I mentioned, Eric Bieniemy returned as offensive coordinator. And I think all Chiefs fans, whether you want to say it or not, I mean, I'm thankful for Matt Nagy's 2 stints with the Chiefs, but obviously the offense has declined quite a bit since EB left. So thank you, Matt Nagy. Farewell. Best of luck with the New York Giants, but I'm glad we have EB back. Went to the Commanders, then he went back to college, and then, now he's returned to the NFL. So EB with the Chiefs, I'm excited for it. I think that was a big reason and part in Travis Kelce returning for year 14. We will see how it goes. It's been said that the Chiefs offense, we can't expect for them to be anywhere near what they were when we had guys like Tyreek, Sammy Watkins, D-Rob, Byron Pringle, McCole Hardman. It's a different offense. Hopefully it's going to be a little bit more run first, at least early on in the season, to not have so much pressure on Mahomes coming back from injury. But I'm excited about EB being back in Kansas City. Hopefully some good things to come this year. Another big coaching change was at wide receivers. Chad O'Shea came from, most recently, the Browns, I believe. And this is actually a return to Kansas City. A lot of people, including myself, didn't even know that, even though I really started watching the Chiefs in the late 90s and early 2000s. He was one of the special teams, I think, assistant coaches between 03 and 05. You look at when we had Dante Hall back then, even though he's going to be a receivers coach, I don't know, maybe him and Dave Toub can kind of figure out which of our receivers is really going to be the kick/punt returner, and maybe there's some improvements there with special teams. For receivers, I think there needs to be a much more bigger emphasis on not just eliminating the dumb drops that we've had, but also just getting open and finding open space when the play breaks down, because that was something that was very critically missing last season for Mahomes. He did not have help in that area. The other big coaching change that I'm super pumped about is DeMarco Murray as our running backs coach. And I think he's coming from Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma. But he was a great running back in the NFL years ago when he played for the Cowboys. So I'm excited for that. And that kind of leads into the coaches that we fired. Previously, our running backs coach was Todd Pinkston, former Eagles wide receiver. I get it. It's an offensive position, but having someone who, let alone didn't even play the position, but also hasn't coached the position before, be your running backs coach didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And Connor Embry, who was the wide receivers coach, I think there's just been some criticism, and this is probably why he left too, but just the drops, not getting open, probably a little bit of poor route running, especially when you look at how Worthy has had an issue so far being in the NFL with spatial awareness, particularly along the sidelines. So hopefully a lot of these things are going to change with some of these coaching changes that we've made. Free agency. As I was writing my blog post and kind of preparing for this video yesterday, I've kind of been of the belief that I really felt like Hollywood and Juju were both going to walk, and I've so far been right about one of those. Hollywood Brown, as of yesterday, signed with the Eagles, which I hate, but you know what? Hollywood Brown is probably towards the end of his career. I know he's young, but he's definitely battled some injuries. He only signed a 1-year deal with Philly, so I think that kind of says it all right there. I liked Hollywood. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out injury-wise, availability-wise, and just the last couple of seasons that we've had. Juju, I think, is still an unsigned, unrestricted free agent, so he could sign back with the Chiefs. If he doesn't, I've heard there's rumors of him reuniting with Pittsburgh, which, he totally deserves to do if he wants to. He's helped us win a Super Bowl. I like Juju, but at this point in his career, being a veteran, not having quite the same amount of burst and speed that he used to, he's really been used more in blocking schemes, and he kind of just gives you some targets. He'll get some targets here and there. I think right now, seeing the Chiefs having re-signed Tyquan Thornton, which I think was huge. He showed a lot of potential last year, and for some reason didn't really get the playing time that I think we all felt that he deserved in the back half of the season when Rice and Worthy both returned from suspension and injury. So hopefully Thornton gets a chance to really step up and be more than just a deep ball threat this year. So that's why I think I don't really know if I see Juju coming back. I think Jalen Royals hasn't really gotten much opportunity to play at receiver. Nico Remillo, although smaller and more of a special teams guy, I think he and Royals both deserve some time at that wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 spot. Otherwise, I think it would be interesting if the Chiefs don't go D-end edge rusher in the draft, which I really think they should, like a lot of Chiefs fans. And even if they do, I think at some point in the draft, outside of defensive back, linebacker, I think you are going to have to go after a receiver. And I've heard it's not the best of draft classes this year for a receiver, but if we can find a bigger bodied, taller, more muscular receiver who can try to compete for contested catches and win one-on-one battles, that would be huge, because so far we really just have speed and guys that are good at running the short intermediate routes. And then you have Worthy and Thornton, who are your, deeper vertical threats. Otherwise, in terms of, releases and trades made, Mike Dana was released, and apparently there's potential that he could actually be signed back with the Chiefs. So it could be a very short-term goodbye and welcome back, just depending on if the Chiefs want to add bodies and depth for their, 90, 95-man roster heading into training camp. But if we don't bring Dana back, I think we had a good run with him, but it was time to move on. Now, Jawan Taylor, him being released, I think all Chiefs fans are happy about. When you look at the numbers, it's been said that Jawan Taylor was actually a pretty good offensive right tackle for us. But obviously, the trends and patterns that he had with penalties, not being able to line up properly with his back leg so far in the backfield, and he's off of the center's hip, that was just too costly and risky for us to even consider re-signing him, in my opinion. If he were to ever, I don't know if he's been signed elsewhere, but Jawan Taylor just, he wasn't doing it. He wasn't cutting it. And I think at right tackle, I think we've got to see maybe who wins a camp battle between Esapole and Jalen Moore. And I think offensive line in general is going to be where we continue to try to add depth at, in the draft and also in free agency and heading into training camp. In terms of other guys, more so on the defensive side of the ball that I'm going to miss is Leo Chanel, Trent McDuffie, and Jalen Watson, both being traded to the Rams. A lot of moves were made on defense. We lost a lot of talent, especially from our 2022 draft class. We were going to have to pay one, if not both of them at some point. And especially Trent McDuffie, we were going to have to pay him big money, big time. It's just the cost of doing business. I'm going to miss both of them. But the Rams, that has been said that that's been their weak area and a big reason that they didn't make it to the Super Bowl last year. One team's area of weakness, one team's strength. We shed some of that talent, and now we've got to retool and rebuild in those areas. We also let go of Brian Cook and went to the Bengals. Joshua Williams, I don't think is going to be missed as much. He didn't really get as much playing time as some of these other guys, but, he did have some playing time here and there. Definitely struggled a little bit at cornerback, even though he's a taller, longer-armed guy. He was a huge bright spot, culture fit, and just humor-wise. I loved Joshua Williams, but he's now with the Tennessee Titans. I think Dave Merritt is going to have his work cut out for him, defensive backs coach for the Chiefs. I'm really hopeful of the continued development of now second-year cornerback Noel Williams. I think he showed some huge potential and promise last year. Jaden Hicks I've loved his hard-nosed, hard-hitting mentality at safety. We brought in safety Alohi Gilman from the Ravens, I believe, and then cornerback Kader Kohu. I think we still have Christian Fulton unless he signs elsewhere. We've got Chamari Connor, Christian Roland Wallace under rookie contract. Hopefully the Chiefs can kind of make some sense of this cast of DBs, and that is another area and focus for the draft as well. They've shown a trend over recent years where they try to go cheaper and take advantage of draft and development in the secondary. What was once thought that the Chiefs were not going to spend on running back, That was the big splash and biggest move they made in free agency. So far is they went out and signed the top running back on the free agent market and the Super Bowl MVP in Kenneth Walker III, aka K9. All right. So we've got our lead back. We also got a big defensive tackle, Kairos Tonga from the Patriots. So two huge, notable Super Bowl participants from this last year are now on the Chiefs. So you've got Tonga and Chris Jones, hopefully Omar Norman-Lott coming back from injury to solidify that interior D-line. You've got George Karlaftis. I think it's pretty much, even though a lot of these, mainstream NFL experts and analysts have been suggesting the Chiefs need to go O-line in the draft first round with their first pick, at least as of now, pick number 9, unless Veach does some kind of trade to move up a couple of spots, I think we all, as Chiefs Kingdom, still think we need to go D-end edge rusher with our first pick. I think there's still some talk and speculation out there of whether the Chiefs actually try to go after Jeremiah Love with their first pick. I think you've got your main back. We did get, what's his name, DeMercado from the Cardinals as another secondary back. We let go of Pacheco. I don't know if we're bringing back Kareem Hunt. I think in the draft, I think you've got to go edge rusher first. Hopefully it's Reuben Bain Jr. I really like that guy out of Miami. Whether it's your second pick later on in the first round or later on in the draft, I think it's got to be defensive back. It's got to be linebacker, wide receiver, O-line. Like I said, offensive line-wise, I think the interior is pretty solid. I'm still a little bit concerned and questionable about Kingsley Suamataia, but I think he actually took a lot bigger strides last year than it appeared at times. I think there were plays that I saw sometimes where it looked like he was struggling, but I think he was actually just trying to overcompensate for how banged up and weak the offensive line was at points. In some games where they didn't even matter anyway, but he was trying to make up for Wanye Morris and Mike Caliendo and those guys and their struggles. But I think when you've got Creed, Trey, and Kingsley shoring up the interior, I liked what I saw of Josh Simmons. Hopefully his availability, he plays more games consistently going into 2026. And then right tackle, like I said earlier, Esapole, I liked what I saw out of him when he had to come in and fill in at times. It's still mind-boggling why we even let go of him in the first place. I think out of training camp last year. If it's going to be between him and Jalen Moore to fight for that right tackle spot, I saw the Chiefs let go of Mike Caliendo, which I don't think many people cared about, and then they brought him back as a depth piece. Hopefully the Chiefs try to maybe bring in one more solid piece that can maybe battle for that right tackle spot between Esapole and Jalen Moore. But I think the offensive line is actually in much better shape than people realize. But they are one starter away from, if an injury occurs, to already being kind of vulnerable and having to pick and choose which of your second string guys can actually get the job done. So that's the only concern that I have, is their depth is weak at this point. That's pretty much it for the draft. I'm not really going to go much further beyond that, just because a lot of this is still just speculation. I think the consensus is we should take D-end/edge rusher with our first pick. We will see what happens. We'll see if we even end up with 2 picks in the first round by the time we get into April and at the draft. Who knows what Veach is working on right now and has up his sleeve and plans for, if we want to package that into maybe a higher pick in the first round. If we can just retool on the defensive side and really focus our scheme and strategy on running the ball, really taking advantage of K9 out there in the backfield, it's going to be a much better turnaround this year. But I think the bottom line is I don't want to see the Chiefs sacrifice and force and press so much to the point where we risk Mahomes' safety and health just to try to have a big turnaround and get back to contending for a Super Bowl as a bounce back year. I want us to be smart and think long term, play the long game. That would be my approach. Hopefully we can try to simplify some things and just have a better year in 2026. And I think if we kind of knock out a lot of these mental errors, I think the Chiefs can actually play pretty good football and compete and get back to somewhat where they were. We'll just have to see. Those were a lot of thoughts, just kind of catching up from February and March and free agency so far. But now that free agency is kind of dying down between now and the draft, I will look to come out with my next podcast episode in April after the draft to kind of recap every single pick that the Chiefs do end up making and any other moves between now and then. That's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Alex Liu. You've been watching Win or Lose Chiefs News. Please hit that subscribe button, leave me a like, comment, share, and I will see you guys next time. Chiefs Kingdom, how about those Chiefs?